So now, without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker to frame the European context of climate neutrality, and welcome Jan Dusik, Deputy Director-General for Climate Action and at the European Commission, and former Deputy Minister in charge of climate protection of the Czech Republic. Mr. Dusik, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Petra. Good morning, everyone here in the room and online as well. And thank you for inviting me and the European Commission to give you a few words about how we see the situation on the 28th of October 2024, 2 weeks before the next conference of parties starts. A bit more than 1 week from the US presidential elections. Many things happening in these days. And one other thing I want to relate to start with is the release of the emission gap report by UNEP, UN Environment Programme, last week. This is an annual release, basically showing how big the gap is towards where we should be in order to implement the Paris Agreement. The latest gap report, as usual, is not a joyful bedtime reading, and it basically shows that the full implementation of the current NDCs, the National Determined Contributions, will only reduce our emissions by 10% by 2030, which is significantly lower reduction than the one that we would actually need, and it would lead to limiting the global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, whereas the current policies that are in place would lead to a peak warming in the century at 3.1 degrees. And even if we go for the full implementation of the all conditional nationally determined contributions, we would stay just below the 2 degrees Celsius. So we are still far away from where we need to be for the Paris Agreement, for the 1.5 degree. And this is a timely wake-up call as we come to the next conference of parties. European Union will be going there with its position as usual on all the negotiating topics. And on this particular topic of the ambition, we want to say 2 things. One is that the ambition of the nationally determined contributions needs to be scaled up. This will be a call for all the parties to scale up their ambition, especially in the coming period before COP30, when all the NDCs should be collected, analyzed together, and we should get a new prediction where we will be able to land in terms of the warming. So scaling up the ambitions by all the countries is number 1. Number 2, reminding the ambition that was already made in the last conference of parties, the so-called UAE consensus, which has important mitigation objectives, such as tripling renewable energy deployment, doubling the energy efficiency, and a number of others. So we want to recall the importance of staying the course, continuing the ambition, and also to pave the way for COP30, which will again look at the full scale mitigation action. COP29 will be dealing a lot with climate finance, so we are also going there with a full position of the EU on how we see the climate finance, the new collectively quantified goal for the future, how much finance should be put into financing the impacts of climate change. We will be coming for a strong agreement on the quantum, the overall volume, on the contributed base, and on the modalities of how this all would function in the sense of a smaller circle of the public international public finance and the bigger scale of all sources of financing, including innovative. So it's a complex equation, at the end of which we very much hope and will call for an important increase from the current figure, which is $100 billion US dollars per year. That was first achieved in 2021 or 2022 rather. So this will be difficult discussions, but there is a good process of negotiations. So we hope there will be a good result. The other part of the result that we expect from 29 is the agreement on the so-called Article 6, the international carbon markets, and how to enable these international instruments to contribute to the mitigation. To the mitigation activities. Again, we have some good experience already in the EU on this. When we compare where we are in relation to this mentioned emission gap report, in the EU, the picture is relatively good. We managed 7.5% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in between 2023 and 2022. So we are on track on of our 1.5 degree pathway and climate neutrality by 2050. What we have ahead of us is the discussion of the 2040 target. The European Commission in February this year released its communication based on the scientific assessments leading to a proposal of a 90% reduction by 2040 in the EU emissions. The target needs to be agreed with the relevant institutions, notably the Council and the European Parliament, and that will be also the basis for then communicating the EU's nationally determined contribution for 2025, which will be derived from the 2040 figure. So once we have the 2040 target agreed, we will be able to communicate towards the global process, the UNFCCC process, what is our share for 2035. The way we plan to do this is an amendment of the European climate law that already sets the climate neutrality by 2050, and that will then lead into a legal framework. So we have the targets, we have the policy and legal framework, and we just need to draw the line from where we are expected to be with the implementation of the European Green Deal and Fit for 55 to where we need to be in 2050. And we are busy with those discussions right now. Meanwhile, there is a lot happening. We can see that the ETS system is working well. It is growing. It has embraced the maritime sector, the aviation sector, as regards the European space. It will be enlarged to housing and transport with the so-called ETS2. And there is also a discussion how this can inform another big sector that still needs to be addressed, and that's agriculture. So how these market mechanisms that we have in place, how they can serve to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. We see that we have the solutions available and that they can be scaled up. And it takes the political determination and courage that will accompany that change. We have in Europe the national energy and climate plans, which have been submitted by more than half of the member states, in spite of the deadline already passed. But we see these as basically the national investment programs towards decarbonization, and this is very much the work that needs to be done by the national governments. If you look at the political agenda of the European Commission going for the next period, you can see in the political guidelines of Ursula von der Leyen the clear commitment to the climate neutrality and to the 2040 target. We can see a link between what we know as the European Green Deal to a clean development, to boosting the competition of the European Union, to connecting with
the global markets. This is then extended through the mission letters to as a mandate for each of the commissioners. We can also see that within the commission there will be clusters of commissioners that will be working on common topics. To give an example, that would be the climate commissioner, energy commissioner, the environment commissioner, and then the executive vice president for clean transition. Of course, this has an important international dimension as well, how we can work with partners around the world to ensure responsibility, to boost ambition in reducing climate change impacts, and to build further cooperation. We are using an array of tools, climate diplomacy, of course, then the deployment and growth in international carbon markets. But we are also seeing this as an avenue to link to the needs of the European economy in terms of the critical raw materials on one hand, or the establishment of lead markets in the world for European products. And of course, an important part of this equation is also the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, for the energy-intensive sectors to maintain a level playing field. There is also a strong social dimension, the Social Climate Fund that will accompany the ETS for the energy and for the housing and transport sectors will start implementation next year. So this will alleviate the pressure as regards the social impacts of the transition, and hopefully will generate the right momentum in accompanying all the households in transitioning to decarbonization. There's also lots of other funding mechanisms like the Innovation Fund, the Modernization Fund. We are also looking into opportunities where the EU can offer services to member states for instance, auctions of hydrogen or for public procurement that could also help with simplifying the administrative burden of the mechanisms. The last thing I would mention is it's not all about mitigation only. We are looking into the adaptation to climate change and resilience, and that goes both for the EU and for the global level. The latest Eurobarometer survey showed that the citizens in Europe have great fears about the risk of extreme weather events. And we also see that the cost of inaction is multiple times higher than the cost of action, and especially the cost of timely action. So this ultimately is threatening the lives of people, but also the whole functioning of economies, and it basically underlines that we don't have another opportunity, but we have to go in this direction. So as Ursula von der Leyen said, staying the course on the decarbonization is something that we can expect the Commission to continue working on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dusík, for these really comprehensive overview of what the European Union is, the European Commission with DG Climate Action, and also projecting us, giving us a nice framing for the discussions to come. I will now immediately go to our next speaker and welcome Peter Wittoeck. Peter Wittoeck is Head of Climate Change Service at in Belgium at the Ministry for Health, Food and Environment. And Peter, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Petra. Well, thanks very much first and foremost for inviting me. Big thank you to the JPA Climate, Petra, Frank. Secondly, I have to make clear that I will not be speaking on behalf of the Belgian government, even though I am a civil servant in that government. I'd rather be speaking as a practitioner. This conference is meant to be on the interface between science and practice, so I'll be sharing some thoughts from that perspective. I'll not be speaking on behalf of my government. I'll not be speaking on behalf of my minister either, but I would start by quoting her, the Belgian Federal Climate Minister, Zakia Katabi, who, when she took office some 4 years ago, posted the following on her social media: climate change. It's not a question of belief, it's about science. I agree entirely with that, of course. The science has been clear for decades now. However, tackling the climate crisis is no matter of science alone, certainly not of silence. It's a matter of policy and politics acting, or indeed not, on the basis of what science tells us. Ladies and gentlemen, there is great cause for concern about the state of our climate. Climate-related extreme events have become a stark reality for many of our citizens globally and in Europe, a new normal today, and a new normal that scares our citizens, as Jan just said. The European Climate Risk Assessment that was published earlier this year by the European Environment Agency has shown us yet again, in fact, that the climate crisis poses a real threat to Europe's energy and food security, to ecosystems, to our infrastructures, to water resources, to people's health, and even our financial stability. And it showed that many of these risks have actually already today reached critical levels and can become catastrophic without urgent and decisive action. Climate science, dear colleagues, tells us indeed to be concerned, to be alarmed even. The political realities of our societies are another potential cause for concern. Concerned, as many of us were, for example, that after the recent European elections, EU policy may turn away from the major advances that were made in the course of the previous legal term with the Green Deal, the European Climate Law, and the Fit for 55 package. That's one of the reasons why during Belgium's presidency of the Council of the European Union in the first half of this year, we invested a lot in bringing the remaining files of the Fit for 55 package to closure, and in taking the conversation forward on the next steps towards net zero by 2050, the 2040 target Jan just mentioned, and the conditions needed to enable the transition. We were concerned, yes, but now it seems that there is a cause for hope. The European Commission, as Jan said, has maintained its proposal for a 90% emission reduction target by 2040 based on science, the recommendations by the European Scientific Advisory Board, I'm sure you're familiar with, and the 90% target figures in President von der Leyen's political guidelines and in her mission letters to Commissioners designate Rivera and Hoekstra. As the title of this conference rightly states, we need to see an acceleration in climate action, and we need it now. We need to urgently implement what we've subscribed to in the context of the Fit for 55 package, and we need to work hard to make the new 2040 target a realistic one. 90% might be realistic in terms of what scientific analysis and social and economic impact assessments tell us, but 90% will only be realistic if it is politically and socially acceptable. If we put in place the policies that create the right enabling conditions for our economies and societies to be able to face the challenges the climate transition brings and to grasp the opportunities it presents. The conditions that will reassure our businesses and citizens that the job can be done. Center stage nowadays, in this context of creating these enabling conditions, is the ongoing debate about the EU's competitiveness and industrial policy, nourished notably by the recently published reports by Mario Draghi and Enrico Letta, and a clear priority for the next European Commission with the announcement by President von der Leyen of a clean industry deal in the first days of the new Commission. And that is definitely cause for hope. I've been in climate policy for some decades now, and I'm happy that the old adage from some quarters in the public debate that climate action would harm competitiveness now finally seems to have been turned around into a recognition, a belief, if you will, in mainstream politics that the climate transition can be a force for good for our economy, that sustainability can be a driver for competitiveness, that the climate transition can push our economies forwards, as science has been telling us all along. The Draghi report clearly says, and I quote, that if Europe's ambitious climate targets are matched by a coherent plan to achieve them, decarbonization will be an opportunity. It also says, however, that if we fail to coordinate our policies, there is a risk that decarbonization could run contrary to competitiveness and growth, hence calling for a joint plan for decarbonization and competitiveness. This message about climate action as an economic opportunity for European industry is important and a hopeful one indeed, but it only addresses part of the challenge. First, a resilient and competitive industry not only requires a coordinated approach to decarbonization, it requires in-depth insight in the impacts of the climate crisis, of the triple planetary crisis as a whole, in fact, on our economic tissue. Climate disruption, if not addressed adequately, will have a drastic impact on our industries, on our economies, on our citizens' well-being. Similarly, the dependency of our economic system on biodiversity, on ecosystems, and the growing exposure of our economy to nature-related risks requires much more attention. And science will continue to have a crucial role in that regard. Second, a clean industry is not only about clean technologies. Technologies will not take off if they are not adopted by users. Innovation will not succeed without new demand generating new markets. Social sciences and the humanities can give us insight on psychological and sociological levers to change consumer behavior and to foster the demand for green innovations. Furthermore, and maybe even more importantly, they can help us give our citizens a sense of agency in the climate transition, a sense of agency in the face of the uncertainties that come with that transition, and help increase the societal acceptability of the policies that are needed. And that brings me to my third point, the need for a just and inclusive transition, which also was one of the priorities of our presidency in the first half of the year, by the way. And we've made some right steps in the right direction, and Jan mentioned some of them, but we still have a long way to go in terms of dealing with the impacts of the climate transition on employment, on the need for developing new skills for workers, on the distribution of costs and efforts within society in a manner that is fair for all. Fourth, decarbonization is not only about clean energy, and it is not only about carbon capture, utilization, and storage. True, the energy sector, energy-intensive industries, automotive and transport sectors need to decarbonize. Producing green steel and cement is crucial. But the uptake of circular practices in the construction sector, for example, is also key. And it is absolutely critical that the climate transition go hand in hand with the transition to a circular economy, without a paradigm shift from the traditional linear model of take, make, dispose to a regenerative approach that emphasizes the restoration and regeneration of products, material, and energy. The climate transition cannot succeed. We notably also need to speak about agriculture and our food system as a whole, which are both a significant source of how to abate emissions and of biodiversity loss, and will be drastically impacted by the climate and biodiversity crisis, and are subject to social and political upheaval. The role of agriculture in the climate transition cannot be reduced to merely a way of capturing and storing carbon. Finally, I'm happy that finance figures on the agenda of this conference. So the Draghi report, as you will have seen, estimates that the investment needs for decarbonizing our industry are at around 450 billion euros. You know, Jan told us that finance is the headline subject for the next climate summit for COP29, starting in Baku in a couple of weeks in Azerbaijan. And the strategic alignment of private finance, together with the leveraging and de-risking role of public investments, are very much at the core of the discussions there. And they will have to be at the European level as well. The next multi-annual financial framework will have a crucial role in that regard. An opportunity to upscale and coordinate targeted support instruments at EU level, and to provide adequate funding for cross-border and resilient infrastructure, public goods that are the backbones of our economy and benefit all sectors and all Europeans. Another European public good, which requires adequate investment, is transnational research and innovation, not only in industry and technology, but also for fundamental research, social sciences and humanities, and low-tech innovations. We need both fundamental research and applied research. We need frontrunners and implementers. We need technological and social innovation. And only a multidisciplinary approach across all different fields of science can help us understand the complexities and interconnections of the challenges associated with the triple planetary crisis, can help us develop the systemic whole-of-society solutions that we need to face these challenges. Let me close, ladies and gentlemen, by saying that only if science continues to inform and indeed confront policymakers with facts and evidence will the transition to a climate-neutral, sustainable future be possible. And I have good hopes that this conference can contribute to that. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your speech, very comprehensive speech. By chance, a Belgian stakeholder. What I noticed at least 4 times the word hope, which I think is also a very nice framing for the discussions we are having. And we now go to our last speaker in this opening session, and we will hear from Frank McGovern, who's Chief Scientist at the Irish Environment Protection Agency and Vice Chair of JPI Climate for the Equinox. Frank is, so to say, the chef d'orchestre, the architect of the gathering of today, and I welcome Frank on stage.
Yes, thank you very much, Petra, and thank you, Jan, and thank you, Peter. There's not much more I can add to your very comprehensive statements, but certainly we must recognize, I think we all in this room and looking online recognize that science is central to our understanding of climate change. It's central to understanding the challenges it poses. It's also key to the solutions that we need. Climate science is evolving rapidly and across many disciplines, and that is essential as we are dealing with an issue that cuts across all aspects of life on Earth and its future, including the future of humanity. Europe has rich resources in climate science and expertise. That is apparent from the multiple European contributions to the work of the IPCC over many decades, and indeed it was European scientists who established the concept of the IPCC back in the 1980s. But in Europe, realizing the potential of that resource has always been a challenge. It was something that I wished to address when I took up the role of chair of JPI Climate back in 2017. We need a smooth and efficient transfer of knowledge from science to policy and action, and to challenge policy and action, as Peter was saying as well. While there are many opportunities, the barriers are also there, and they are quite difficult to deal with. Many of them are actually administrative and governance related. Addressing these brought us to the first Equinox Summit, which is held here in Brussels in March 2022, and supported again by the Belgian government. So really appreciate the support of Belgium for this. It took place just after we finished the IPCC 6th assessment cycle. We just signed off on the synthesis report, and we had the European co-chairs from each of the working groups here in Brussels to talk about what needed to happen. The summit statement agreed to enhance how we work across the European research area, and the European research area is it includes the EU, but it's bigger than the EU. It brings in associate countries, and now the UK always in the European research area. It realised that we need to establish systems and structures to enable us to do this, to enhance return on investments in research and observation systems, individually at a national level and subnational levels, and collectively across the Horizon programs and similar programs, and to share knowledge and experience. Each country, big, small, medium, has its own challenges, but they're often the experiences that they have in addressing those challenges is really useful, and we need to be able to share that knowledge, that practitioner knowledge. The second Equinox Summit included fundamental sciences within the Equinox process. The original process focused on climate neutrality, climate resilience, and managing transition and transformation. So it's appropriate that we're going to start here today with some insights on fundamental sciences. And before we hand over to Ole Christian and Piers for that first session, I just wanted to flag a few things to you. Last night, you will have got a link to a document. This is a printout of the document. It's a working paper, but it will, I suppose, be the report on this meeting. So it's a reference document for now, but it's not complete. There are gaps. There's a lot of information in there already, a lot of very useful information, but there are gaps, and we'll fill in those gaps over the next 2 days, 3 days. And hopefully at the end, what we want to have are key messages. And some of those key messages are on a page you'll get here, and they're also embedded in the report. And what we want to ask you here in the room and online is to help us develop those key messages, to make sure that they are pertinent to the areas that we're looking at. And at the end, we also want to look to the future and where we will be in 2026, because the next forum will take place in 2026. And as Jan and Peter know well, 2026 will be heading straight into the start of the technical phase of the next global stocktake. So it'll be very useful to have at a European level an analysis of how to achieve the key goals that we've established globally and in Europe. And so this is a stepping stone to, while it's important in itself, it's a stepping stone to 2026. So with that, I really hope that you enjoy the engagement over the next few days. There's really great people here, and online. I know there's people swapping in and out. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the world we live in these days. So at the end, what I hope is we have the right messages. We know where we're going for the future. And as I say, feedback on everything about this will be very useful to help us develop this further. So with that, I will close. And I think we'll go straight into the open session and Piers and Ole Kenneth. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.